For all the grief it gets, the Gen 6 era had plenty of amazing moments in races that we as fans will surely talk about for years to come. These are not those races. While we may remember these races I'm about to talk to for years to come, it's all for the wrong reasons. This doesn't mean that one bad moment will make a race bad, but it does mean that these races are pretty bad. I'm just going to say that straight up. I know I said it before, but it bears repeating. At number 10, we have the 2018 Auto Club 400 at the Auto Club Speedway. This race is one that was so bad because of how spread out it was that it actually was used by many fans to justify the high downforce and low horsepower package that we currently have for intermediate tracks. This race just was flat out dominated by Martin Truex Jr. as well. When you look at the intervals, it's absolutely astounding. When Martin Truex Jr. crossed the finish line, the battle for 4th and 5th was half a lap down. What this really was, in my opinion, was the end of Auto Club Speedway's competitive era as a track for great racing, as at this point the track was so worn out, the seams were so prevalent in the racing, that drivers really couldn't move much around the track. After years and years of great racing and great memorable finishes, this race was such a letdown that it has to be at least number 10 on this list. And number 9 was the 2016 Coca-Cola 600 at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. Again, this is one that Martin Truex Jr. won. This isn't going to be a giant pattern on the entire video, but it is kind of funny how it started. But in all reality, the thing about this race is that unlike a lot of interesting Coca-Cola 600s, there was no real strategy that spiced it up. The next year in 2017 had a great fuel mileage finish. 2015 also had a good one like that. There was strategy in 2014. There was great racing in 2019. A lot of the Coke 600s in the Gen 6 era were not great races, but had stuff that was intriguing about them. This one did not. And it's probably all chalked up to the fact that Martin Truex Jr. led all but like 6 or 7 laps in this race. Yeah, it's a great story, and yes, it is impressive and should be appreciated, but it doesn't mean that it was a great race. And number 8 is the 2013 AAA Texas 500 at the Texas Motor Speedway. It wouldn't be a list about bad races and bad racing in NASCAR without Texas being on this list. This race was absolutely dominated by Jimmie Johnson during the chase on his way to his 6th championship. And that was part of this race's detriment, is that it really didn't have much change in the championship battle that at the time was really close between Jimmie Johnson and Matt Kenseth. Kenseth had a lot of issues when it came to speeding on pit road and mistakes, and Johnson, well, was Jimmie Johnson. Plus, 2 of the only 5 cautions of the day were for debris. I'm not saying that cautions have to be needed for good races, but it would help to get the field closer together if it was done naturally. But the thing is about this race is that it was nothing really too bad about the racing, it's just that really nothing really happened. At number 7 is the 2020 Hollywood Casino 400 at the Kansas Speedway. This race at times did have action. Because of the 550 horsepower package, there was a lot of action on the restarts, but as is usual with this kind of racing, everything got spread out, everything got single file, and everything got pretty boring. And the biggest disappointment was the fact that there were plenty of great Kansas races that were really competitive, even with this package. But unfortunately, there was no real finish, as Joey Logano led over Kevin Harvick and Alex Bowman, but because of dirty air, neither of them could do anything with any of the guys in front or behind them. At number 6 is the 2015 Pure Michigan 400 at the Michigan International Speedway. This race was part of the start down the bad path for NASCAR's high downforce path. While they didn't take it down to 550 horsepower, they had the giant-ass spoilers on them, and much of the day was single file because of it. Matt Kenseth dominated this race. Aside from Austin Dillon having a few bright spots in the lead, Kenseth led 146 of the 200 laps on the day. The thing was, just like a lot of the races on this list, it was very bleh. It was between a great finish at Watkins Glen and a good Bristol night race. So there really wasn't much to talk about here. Plus, to kind of rub it in to show how bad this race was, a picture from this race was actually the thumbnail that I used to show why 2015 overall was so bad. Now, entering the top 5, we're going to continue hating on 2015 with the 2015 Jeff Kyle 400 at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. This was the first of NASCAR's high downforce path with the giant ass spoiler, and the whole day was pretty much single file with some passing here and there. Now, I will give this race some credit. Kyle Busch did get the win with at least a somewhat interesting finish, but the race overall was very, very boring. And for me, this race barely beat out the 2020 edition and probably the 2016 edition as well for being on this list. Yeah, a lot of races at Indianapolis through the Gen 6 era were absolutely awful, and don't let anyone make you forget that. Number 4 is the 2014 Federated Auto Parts 400 at the then named Richmond International Raceway. This was hyped up as a last chance for the new win and you're in chase. It was hyped up as a race that anyone would go for broke in, and it ended up being a very spread out, long drawn out race that was dominated by Brad Keselowski. The thing about this race wasn't that there was something so horrible about it like some of the others on this list. It's just kind of like a few others on this list where nothing notable really happened after an amazing spring race in this one. The only notable thing happened wasn't actually technically on the track, but above it, as this was the race where the drunk fan jumped up, climbed on up the catch fence, and sat there with cars driving underneath them at over 100 miles an hour. At number 3 is the 2021 Daytona 500 at the Daytona International Speedway. This race was hyped up pretty big as it was the start of a brand new season, of course. It was the first Daytona 500 under the COVID pandemic, and it was something that really fans could be drawn to get away from everything for a while. And the first 13 laps were actually really good. There was 3 and 4 wide racing throughout the pack. People were desperate as rain was approaching, and the huge one took out most of the field and took out a lot of great contenders. Then, right after that, there was a giant 6, 7, 8, I don't remember how long, all I know it was long as hell, hour rain delay. I was at this race. It was brutal being there in the stands, as when the rain came, aside from a few select areas that everyone had to huddle up to, completely not social distance, we had to basically just sit and get rained on. Then when they got back to racing and it was really cold, it was single file almost the entire night. Nobody made a move. They just tried to take care of each other until the last corners of the last lap, where a move was made, causing a last lap crash and ending the race under caution at like 1 in the morning. The only bright spot to this race, other than the giant fiery crash, was the fact that Michael McDowell, the underdog driver, got his first win in it. Coming in at runner-up is the 2019 Pocono 400 at the Pocono Raceway. Surprisingly, this didn't have many long runs to it, which makes it so much more baffling that this race really wasn't that good. The low horsepower and high downforce package made passing horribly difficult. Kyle Busch won without much of a fight in this race, and really, there was nothing much to talk about. I think that's actually a general theme of this list. There was nothing much to talk about. The thing is, it's really surprising to not see a good race in this Pocono race, as many of the 550 Pocono races have been good in the last 3 years. Look at 2021's races. Those races were actually quite competitive, and you had a great moment, for instance, with Kyle Larson and Alex Bowman going back and forth, and just in general, there was a lot of racing for the lead. The thing was, there was no strategy in the 2019 race. The package was even worse in 2019 at this track because they didn't have much figured out. And on top of that, I think a lot of fans wouldn't like it because the winner was Kyle Busch. Most fans honestly wanted the race to finish just so they could see what Kyle Busch would say about it. That speaks volumes of how bad this race was. Now, the absolute worst race of the Gen 6 era in NASCAR Cup Series racing has to be the 2013 Daytona 500 at the Daytona International Speedway. This, by far, is the most hated Gen 6 race outside of Spingate, which actually wasn't that bad of a race, which is why it's not on the list. It was the first points-paying Gen 6 race as well, and almost the entire race was run single file. And the one time it wasn't in the middle section, a crash happened, so they ran single file, scared of wrecking the brand new race cars they got. Like, the whole thing outside of a wreck was single file racing until about 20 to go. The only time that they actually raced side by side for a prolonged amount of time, and that was cut short by a caution. As a NASCAR fan, really nothing could go right in this race to make it entertaining for you. A lot of people I know that were watching the race with me were falling asleep at different points of it. It was really that boring. And for a track like Daytona, an event like the Daytona 500, that's a bad thing. Dale Jr. and Mark Martin tried to spice it up at the finish, but in the end, Jimmy Johnson was able to block their run, retain the lead, and get the win. In my opinion, the worst 500 in NASCAR history was the worst Gen 6 race too. So that's it. That's my top 10 or not top 10 list, however you want to put it. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think are the worst Gen 6 races that we've ever seen? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're at it, leave a like on this video, share this video, and subscribe to my channel for more great NASCAR content where we won't talk about boring races like these ones. Also, thank you to all my channel members for your support throughout the year. It has been amazing to see. So until next time, have a good one.